All right, students, for your first Doing History inquiry, we're going to be talking about the topic of impeachment. Every inquiry we start with a question-focused document. The goal of this question-focused document is just to get us into the topic. We start with John Dewey's idea. He said, history deals with the past, but this past is the history of the present. So we look at this question-focused document and we first try and identify what appears to have been the problem facing America in the past. Let's look at this. What is it that we're looking at? It appears to be a ticket. What does this ticket admit you into? The U.S. Senate, the impeachment of the president. What appears to be the problem facing America in 1868? What was happening? What was happening to the president back in 1868? After you've identified the problem, you need to generate a question about the document. What does this make you wonder? What questions do you have when you look at this ticket? After we've finished with the question-focused document, we take advice from John Dewey, who said the true starting point of history is always some present situation with its problems. We're going to try and find out what impeachment-related issue may be happening today. We're going to do that by listening to an article and answering the questions in this chart. So the first thing we're looking for, what did the House just do to now former President Trump? We're going to try and find why people support that, why people oppose that, and you're going to use that information to explain to me whether or not you support or oppose the action taken by the House in this case. Let's listen to the article.
We now have the words of a brief from House impeachment managers who have sent a document over to the United States Senate in preparation for former President Trump's impeachment trial. They call the president's actions on and leading up to January 6th a grievous betrayal of his oath of office. The 9 House managers say Trump created a powder keg, striking a match and then seeking personal advantage from the ensuing havoc. That's how they describe the way a mob of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. And the managers add, if provoking an insurrectionary riot against a joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense, it is hard to imagine what would be.
Okay, so we learned a lot just in this first paragraph. What did the House of Representatives just do to former President Trump? Was he impeached? So you would write something along the lines of President Trump was impeached. Let's find out why they said that.
Would be. NPR congressional correspondent Kelsey Snell is with us now. Hi there, Kelsey.
Hi there.
So everyone knows about the attack on Congress January 6th. How do Democrats, House Democrats here, the House managers, connect that attack to the former president?
They are making the argument that Trump was personally responsible for that attack because they say rioters were chanting President Trump sent us and hang Mike Pence as they were marauding through the halls of the Capitol. They include a lot more analysis here of how they say Trump went about animating and driving the rioters to violent outcomes. They have videos, they have evidence of the way that the rioters were interpreting his actions and his words. They say his actions were so severe that elections alone cannot be a sufficient safeguard against future abuse. And this is a quote here. They say, it is the electoral process itself that President Trump attacked and that must be protected from him and anyone else who would seek to mimic his behavior.
Although we have to know.
Okay. What did we learn? What do some lawmakers think President Trump is responsible for causing? Think back to what you all, I'm sure, saw in the news related to January 6th. What did this article just tell us? They were talking about the riot that happened at the Capitol. Some lawmakers believe President Trump was the one who caused that riot.
Are going to a Senate where a large minority, enough to acquit the president, have already voted that it's just not time yet to go after the former president. 45 Senate Republicans voted that they felt the trial was unconstitutional. How did the House...
What does that mean? This is an important term. Unconstitutional. Remember that in our first assignments, we talked about how the Constitution is supposed to set the guidelines for how our government is run. If you consider something unconstitutional, does that go against the guidelines? Is it therefore then something we should not do?
Just answer that.
It is a central question here. In fact, they spend 30 of the 80 pages of this brief focused on addressing that question. It was something that that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer asked them to address in their brief. But they say that Trump committed the impeachable offenses during the last days in office, and they say that the Constitution demonstrates that a former official remains subject to trial and conviction for abuses that were committed while in office. We've
Okay. So, this idea here is what we need to focus on the right side. They said to impeach a former president is unconstitutional. They think this is an abuse of Congress's powers. We'll listen to the rest of the article, and then you're going to tell me, based on what you've learned, do you support or oppose the impeachment and conviction and removal from office and barring from office of President Trump? So here's what happens. Normally, an impeachment proceeding is to remove a sitting official, as was President Trump's first impeachment. The difference would be that this would not just impeach him, because that's already happened. That's what the House did. The next step is the Senate has the actual trial. Normally, that is for the removal, which President Trump was acquitted last year. This time, it wouldn't be for his removal because he's already out of office. It would be to bar him from ever holding office again. You're going to tell me if you think President Trump should be convicted of inciting the riot and therefore barred from holding office ever again.
Heard the lead impeachment manager, Jamie Raskin, repeat this line that the Constitution applies on the first day of a president's term and the last day of a president's term and every day in between. And they're saying that impeachment is a constitutional tool. So if the Constitution applies, then they can hold a president accountable for actions taken while in office. But having said all of that, this would be the first impeachment of a former president.
We do have to note, though, there was at least one former official who was impeached and convicted, so we know what the precedent is. But 45 Republicans have decided to disregard that in favor of the former president. Do we know more about how the House managers will try to sway some of them?
They are going to be trying to move the conversation away from that process, away from talking about whether or not this is constitutional. They say that it is, and they make that argument clear, but they want to focus on the visceral, the videos, the evidence that these are all senators that experienced much of the evidence themselves. They want to focus on the way that this was perceived in the room, and they also want to focus on swaying people who are watching this on TV. They staying with the conversation about the process and the constitutionality isn't the way to get to people's hearts and minds through the television. So they're going to try to keep it about the actions and the horror of that day.
NPR's Kelsey Snell, who covers Congress and who will therefore be covering the impeachment trial next week. Kelsey, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you are now going to tell me whether or not you support or oppose, based on the evidence from the article, barring President Trump from holding office ever again. If you have a different solution, a better solution, I'll give you extra credit for explaining it to me. Okay, part 2 of the assignment, we're going to research related past policy case studies. We're going to learn about the impeachment against President Andrew Johnson. We're going to open the web page, and this goes in a couple steps. First, we have to find out what was the issue being debated in the past. Our compelling policy question, what we're asking ourselves, is what consequences should Congress consider when debating impeachment? These are the articles of impeachment against President Andrew Johnson. Articles established by the House of Representatives in the name of themselves and all the people of the United States against Andrew Johnson in support of their impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors. We are going to focus on Article 10 because it's the most related to ours. Andrew Johnson did attempt to bring into hatred the Congress of the United States. Andrew Johnson, as the Chief Magistrate of the United States, said, "I called upon your Congress that is trying to break up the government. Congress has undertaken to poison the minds of the American people." Andrew Johnson said this in 1866. He spoke badly about Congress. For that reason, Andrew Johnson has brought the high office of the President of the United States into disgrace, to the great scandal of all good citizens. He was then and there guilty of a high misdemeanor in office. Article 11 said Andrew Johnson, in disregard of the Constitution and the laws of the United States, declared that the 39th Congress of the United States was not a Congress of the United States. What was President Andrew Johnson being accused of in his articles? Guilty of high crimes. What was his high crimes? What was he doing? So we know that there are three branches of government. There's the president, there's Congress, there's the judiciary. They're all supposed to be equal branches of government. Should the president be saying that one of the other branches is, in his words, poisoning the minds of the American people? Should the president be able to, or allowed to, stop Congress from doing its job? That seems to be the concern here. The President Andrew Johnson was getting in the way of Congress doing their job. So now that we know that Congress was trying to impeach the president because they perceived that he was getting in their way, we need to find out what was going on at the time. We're going to read our historic context to do that. So go way back to 1788 when the Constitution is ratified. Article 2, the article of the Constitution that describes the presidency, Section 4, said the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for, in conviction of, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So if we go way back to 1788, the Constitution creates impeachment as a way to keep certain officials in line. How did Andrew Johnson become president? In 1866, Andrew Johnson became president when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Andrew Johnson was a Democrat from Tennessee during the Civil War, but he stayed with the Union thinking that secession was illegal. For that reason, Lincoln thought he would be a good running mate because he showed Lincoln wanted to bring the country together. Johnson swore an oath to execute the laws of the United States. But after he took office, when Lincoln had passed, he didn't enforce the Reconstruction laws that Congress was passing. Congress was trying to reform the South. Congress was trying to protect the rights of the freemen. But Johnson was having none of it. Congress passed a law called the Tenure of Office Act to stop Johnson from firing Lincoln's cabinet officials. Johnson tried to veto the act but was overridden by Congress. Anyway, he tried to remove one of the secretaries in 1868 against that law, and this led to him being impeached. So our historic context, Andrew Johnson became president when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, but then Andrew Johnson wasn't doing what Congress asked him to do. He wasn't enforcing the laws. He was creating problems for Congress. Okay, in our first section, we're trying to find out what arguments are made in favor of impeaching a president. For our assignment, we're not going to look at the written documents this time, but we're going to look at this cartoon titled King Andy. How he will look, what he will do. This is Andrew Johnson. What's going on in the background? What's this back here? This is the Capitol. This is where Congress does their work. What's happening to the lawmakers? What's happening here? Andrew Johnson As they said, King Andy, what does he seem to be doing? Is he becoming a king? Is he ruling as an emperor? He's got liberty in chains. What's happening to Congress? How is King Andy, Andrew Johnson, treating Congress? It appears he's putting them in danger. Is he allowing them to do their jobs? It doesn't appear so. You are trying to just simplify for me the main idea of this image. What does it appear is happening? What are the main ideas? Andrew Johnson is abusing his powers, and he's endangering Congress? Why would that matter for today's debate over impeachment? What do some people believe Trump did? Did some people believe that he had abused his powers? Some people believe he endangered Congress. That's certainly why they're impeaching him. In Section 2, we're trying to find out what arguments are made against impeaching a president. We're going to look at this cartoon from Harper's Weekly called The Situation. So what do we have happening here? This is cannon. It's a sound of cannon. Does it say Congress? And where is that cannon pointed? Here's Andrew Johnson again, hiding behind his war secretary. What does Congress appear to be trying to do to the president? Blow him away with a cannon? Okay, so who now appears to be overusing their power? Does it look like President Johnson's doing something wrong? Or is this making it look like Congress is doing something wrong? So what's the main idea here? Who's the one abusing their power? Why is that related to today's debate over impeachment? Think back to what those Republican officials said about Trump's impeachment. They said they believe that it's unconstitutional. So some people believe in today's debate that impeaching a former president is unconstitutional. It's an abuse of Congress's powers. Then we move on to the choices and consequences. We need to find out what policymakers decided to do, why they made that choice, and what the consequences were. So, the results of the debate in the past: the House of Representatives did impeach the president. But after a president is impeached, that doesn't really mean much. It has to go to the Senate to decide what's going to happen to him. At that time, the Senate was made up of 54 senators representing 27 states. 10 states, those who had formed the Confederacy, were not yet readmitted. The Senate voted on only 3 articles of impeachment. All 3 votes resulted in counts of 35 guilty and 19 not guilty. Because the Constitution requires a 2/3 of the members vote guilty, the Senate was 1 vote short of convicting Andrew Johnson on all 3 articles. So, Andrew Johnson was impeached, but he was not removed. Why'd they make that choice? In this paragraph, it should be noted one reason senators may have voted against impeaching Johnson was not because they believed what he did wasn't wrong, but instead because they worried about the radical Republican Senator Benjamin Wade, who would have become president if Johnson was impeached. So did they make that choice because of political consequences? As the paragraph said, it wasn't because they didn't think he didn't do something wrong. They just thought it would be bad politics. So what are the consequences of their refusal to remove Johnson? Andrew Johnson was able to finish out his term as president, leaving the presidency on March 4th. However, during the remainder of his term, Johnson began to kind of, I don't want to say fear, but he was less likely to resist Congress's powers. So while they didn't remove him from office, they kept him under control. That would be the real consequence of the impeachment. All right, so now we're going to compare and contrast the two debates. What's the similarity? They're debating impeaching the president. In the past, they were impeaching Johnson for interfering with Congress, for violating the Constitution. Today, why are they impeaching President Trump? Because they said he caused the riot that endangered Capitol, the lawmakers. So now you, after comparing and contrasting the debates, are going to come up with some policy advice. This is where you're actually going to practice taking civic action. You're going to apply what you learned about the past to reflect on today. So you're going to look up the name of your policymaker by following this link. You're going to tell them that you're from Hope Street Academy. You're going to tell them what you're writing about. You're going to tell them why this topic is important. In this case, why is it important we think about the impeachment and the barring of President Trump, former President Trump, from office? All right, here you're going to make your thesis. You're going to decide if you support or oppose the impeachment, conviction, and barring him from office. So you're going to delete the side that you are not going to do in order to form your thesis. Then you're going to come down here and you're going to start building your arguments for that. So if you picked support or oppose above, you do the same right here. After you've figured this out, you're going to go back up and look at your evidence. You will have been able to take what you wrote right here and here, and you're going to delete this information. Just like this. And then you're going to have what's written here and here, and this is going to form a paragraph which you are going to copy